It's always a pleasure on GameFace to catch up with the Chief, the General Manager of AFL South East, who oversees the Mornington Peninsula Football Netball League, John Anderson. John, thanks for your time. We're heading into the second half of the season, the business end of the season. You must be delighted with the way the divisional football concept is going. Two very even competitions.
Yeah, it's proven a very tight two divisions, really, and a good mixture of what was the old Nepean competition and the Peninsula competition. We've got a number of sides from both of those, and it's created a very even competition. So we're looking forward to both at the top end and the bottom end. And I know last week's game, you take, for example, Mornington and Edith Vale Aspendale, that was a critical game in terms of the context of the season. And unfortunately for Mornington, it makes things difficult for them.
And yet Edith Vale Aspendale have been struggling for most of the year, are still in contention to play in the finals because a couple of teams above them, one in particular, the Bombers, although they're 2 games ahead of them, have got a similar percentage to them as well. So they're not out of it yet either. They needed to win that to just stay in contention. That's how tight it is.
Well, I think the Bombers is a good example where only 3 weeks ago they were threatening with relegation. So I think they've won at least the last 3 games, and they're pushing for a final spot now. So look, there's some, and this weekend you look at a few of the games in Division 1. They're really 8-point games, as they say, to play finals. And Rosebud and Bond Beach, for example, that's a game that both those sides will be eyeing off a final spot, and the winner gets a bit of preference.
You must be really pleased that both Rosebud and Dramana, Rosebud almost got relegated and Dramana have come up from second division, are pushing, as you say, for a spot in the finals.
I love what Ricky Johnson had to say a couple of weeks back when you were down at Dramana. They were in second division last year, and the second division was a great thing for them. He spoke at a pre-game lunch. He said that gave them the ability to reset and build, and by winning Division 2, getting into Division 1, they were ready to play at the Division 1 level, and it's been a real success story, because a lot of the divisional competitions, you find clubs that go up, happens a lot in the amateurs where clubs will go up and they'll go straight down, and you don't really want that. And I think it's terrific that Dramana, are up in the top 4 after being in Division 2 last year, and a club like Red Hill or Coringal, you look at them playing in Division 2 at the moment. They're between them, they've lost 1 game, and that was only because they had to play each other. They'll be ready to come and play Division 1 football, whichever one of those wins.
Well, as I've said a few times, Red Hill's the best team I've seen play, the way they play, but they are a second division team, a first division team playing second division football. So they should be, if they can retain all their players, be ready to go next year, which is a great sign.
Yeah, I think they're disappointed they didn't win last year, and they probably, if they'd won last year, would be probably performing similar to what Dramana would be this year. And the other side of the coin, I think, from the divisional structure is, Sorrento is a club that was a top side in the Nepean. It's still a top side in the divisional structure. But what's really important about divisional structures, I think, is more important at the bottom end. So there are clubs that were in the Nepean and that were in Peninsula that I'll use the example of Tyab. Tyab won 3 games in 4 years or something like that. And possibly would be out of existence by now if they didn't have the opportunity to play in a more even competition. Last year they won 6 games, and they're very competitive this year, and that's really the benefit of having a division competition, that sides can go down. And I've spoken to the president of Coringal, for example, who was in the bottom 3 at Peninsula. Found it very hard to get up. Now they're at the top of a Division 2, and they say their gate takings and the atmosphere around the club is.
And they're also attracting players too. That's what it's all about.
Well, I think one of the attractions of the year in the MPNFL this year is Mark Holt, who really brings a crowd, and I'd love to see him play in the finals.
Are you concerned, John, though, that some clubs are going well in the seniors, but they're struggling in the reserves and under-19s? Dramana's one of those. You even look at Devon Meadows, they're struggling to field a team. Sorrento don't have an under-19s, but Anthony Holt has said, the Vice President, that they're ready to go for an under-19s team next year.
That'd be Anthony Ring.
Anthony Ring, yes. Yeah. Sorry, Anthony Ring, the Vice President, yes. And they believe that they'll be okay next year. But there are some issues, aren't there, when you look at the reserves and you look at the under-19s of the two competitions?
I think if we look at what are the problems of the competition, I don't think it's a problem of the divisional structure. I think it's just a problem with community footy generally, is the pathways through via the under-19s or under-18s, whatever the case may be. Because we see with our junior comps, and we administer the Frankston Junior Comp and the South East Juniors, and you've got the Mornington Peninsula Juniors, where the drop-off of players as they come through to under-17s, so the feeder through to under-19s is not great. I really, Sorrento didn't have an under-19s this year, and that's a shame, but I admire what Anthony Ring, who's taking a lead role down at Sorrento, was talking to me the other day, saying they're getting the players and trying to get a rapport with the younger players to try and get the pathway coming through. As we know, there's not a great young population down there, so they have to do some hard work. But yeah, that's an issue for us. And other leagues, we're trying to avoid this. Other leagues have divisional under-19 structures as well. So you've basically got your seniors and your reserves playing together. But then the under-19s, like the Southern Footy League.
Certainly in the Outer East have it too, yeah.
Yeah, and you have actually a different competition because not all the sides can field an under-19 side. So we really want to avoid the situation. We want to keep the under-19s, reserves and seniors as a club together. And so that's a piece of work that's really important.
I know you want third division. Any chance next year?
Look, I'd say unlikely next year, Dan. It is the consensus of the clubs, and certainly from our point of view, from a strategic direction, that the MPNFL should be a third division. There are sides currently in the second division that would like to play in a third division, and I'm sure there are sides outside of our competition that would actually like to play in the MPNFL as a point of entry in the third division, and I think that's strategically the right direction to go. Whether it actually happens next year, I'm not sure. There will be a process we'll go through towards the end of this year about clubs who may wish to come into the competition, and we'll just have to go through that when the time comes.
We've had a lot of questions from our audience on our website, particularly about third division, and obviously some of them are involved with other leagues, neighbouring leagues, concerned that it could impact if the MPNFL was to have a third division on those leagues. I mean, how do you ensure that that doesn't happen on a regular basis? You sort of can't, can you, John?
No, so, I can't be specific about clubs generally, but what the MPNFL group of clubs have said, and look, we went through an exercise 2 years ago, which we would love to have had a three-division competition, including the clubs from the old Casey Cardinia competition, which was an MPNFL competition for a time, and that would have been a terrific, a really strong MPNFL. But what the clubs have said to us now, under their constitution, they will only allow new clubs to come into the league as long as they're in the geographical region of the Mornington Peninsula. So I guess we draw a line from the kind of Devon Meadows across to Edith Vale down to Sorrento and Tyab, etc., as being the geographical region that any club who wants to join the MPNFL within those boundaries will be allowed to come in, rather than the clubs in the Casey Cardinia region.
Are you comfortable with that?
Well, my preference would have been to allow the other clubs to come in and be part of the three division. I think if we'd had got that three division up with the Casey Cardinia clubs, we would have had a fourth division in a fairly short period of time.
Absolutely.
From within our region. But it's not going to happen. I understand that, but I still would like to see the club a three-divisional competition within our region.
So would you like the constitution to be changed, or there's no chance of that ever happening?
I don't think we can change the constitution.
Why not?
The constitution says that 75% of the clubs have actually got to agree to a change in the constitution, and I don't think we'll ever get 17 out of 22 clubs agreeing to change it, on the basis that if it did get changed, they might feel that we are going to bring in some other clubs from outside the region. But the clubs have been quite adamant, almost unanimous, to say, no, we're happy with your three-divisional model, just they need to be geographically aligned to the Mornington Peninsula. So that's what we're running with, and we'll see where it finishes.
We've had a great question from Jeff Calder. He said, will the MPNFL, John, introduce 6 starting positions, which of course are a big part of the AFL now?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and that's something that's determined by AFL Victoria. So what AFL Victoria have designated is that the 666 rule doesn't come into community footy, and we're comfortable with that. I don't think community footy is played the same way as the AFL, and it's very rare for me to go to a MPNFL game and find 36 players in one half of the ground like it is in the AFL, which I just hate with a passion, the way that's played. I think community footy is still played a bit traditionally, and your full forward plays at full forward and half forwards and so on. So I don't...
You're still here. Forget about the zone, man on man from the coach, don't you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there might be some sort of zoning going on, but I don't believe we'll get a direction that the 666 needs to come in our competition.
You happy with the netball involvement? I mean, would you like the netball to be played on the same day, grand final day? That would be perfect, wouldn't it?
Would love to.
It's not going to happen at Car Street, is it? Because they just haven't got the facilities,
the
courts to build, or the resources to build netball courts.
No, I'd love to have the council. We've spoken to the Frankston Council, and I actually think it will happen, Dan, that there'll be a netball facility at Frankston Park. But I love the connection with netball, and the viability of the finals last year was fantastic. We were able to play football and netball. Some of those days last year, the Somerville example, the Mornington games, Hastings was a terrific day where we had the netball and the football together. Was financially beneficial to the league in the first instance, but also from an atmosphere point of view was terrific. So the way the finals are structured this year is that the two grand finals, Division 1 and Division 2, both at Frankston Park.
Yes. And
they'll be big games, of course. But every other final, from elimination right through to preliminary, will be a combined football and netball occasion. So that'll be something to look forward to.
There has been some talk that it would be great for the competition if you had all the finals at Frankston Park, but you need the netball involved, don't you? I can understand why that can't happen.
Yeah, I think that community spirit of the netball and the football is a really strong connection. And look, yeah, I understand the point. I understand that you might play your football, you should play your football at the best venue, and we certainly do that for the grand finals. We would never think of playing grand finals away from that venue, but I think last year proved that it's a successful formula to have netball and football together.
And what about, and we've already seen it happen on 2 occasions this year with outstanding success, that whenever Frankston Dolphins have a home game next year, that the MPNFL will have a curtain raiser?
Yeah, I think, I saw those games. I think that worked really well.
Yeah, it did. Fantastic.
You'd probably comment more than me because as a commentator, but the clubs, I've spoken to the 4 clubs that participated, and they both tell me both games had a good return for the clubs, and they got the opportunity to play on a good ground prior to a VFL game. I would think, from my point of view, I'd rather see the VFL game first than that the MPNFL game be the main game. But anyway, that's something that I don't think Frankston would buy.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're certainly happy to have it as the curtain raiser at 11 o'clock. The only issue is having reserves at 8:30, which was tough for the Sorrento and Pines boys the other week.
Yeah, and so I'll be interested to see how the clubs approach it for next year. Whether if the clubs thought it was successful enough, they'll apply, and I'm sure Frankston would be happy to accommodate them. Yeah.
What about the juniors? Are you concerned that the junior clubs, and John Matthews has put a couple of questions forward on our website about the juniors, saying that some of the junior clubs in the area, the better clubs, are getting better, and the smaller clubs continue to struggle?
Yeah.
Is that a worry?
Yeah, I think so. I think I understand the point. Look, what we've done this year, we really are focusing on junior. I mean, participation of football at junior level is a critical thing. AFL South East.
Are you happy with numbers?
Our response. Well, we've actually got good growth numbers in the Frankston competition this year.
For boys and girls.
For boys and girls, but so girls has always been in a growth pattern the last 2 or 3 years, but the boys across Victoria has tended to plateau a bit. But this year's been quite good at Frankston. What we did this year, which a lot of people will be aware of, is that we have the competition in South East Juniors right through to under 17 with Frankston, and we've actually merged the two competitions at the under 16 and under 17 level. And what that's done is it's kind of dissipated that top versus bottom playing each other, a bit like what we're talking about with the divisional, with the senior. So you've got the bigger clubs in Frankston playing, like the Mount Eliza types and the Frankston Dolphins, big junior clubs, are playing against Beaconsfield and Berwick and so on. So you've got those clubs playing at the top level, and the smaller clubs, you know, where the kids don't feel so threatened playing against the bigger clubs, are playing against clubs of a similar size. So the divisional model at under 17 is actually working very well as well. We've got 5 divisions of under 17s across Casey, Cardinia and Frankston. It's interesting that it's happening in the juniors, but couldn't get it working in the seniors. But it's been a very successful 5 divisions, and then we've also got an under 18 girls combination. So that's one way of trying to fix that problem of having strong playing weak, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Do you think that it should be under 18s, or are you happy with under 19s?
No, that's a conversation and a review we'll be doing. Is should the entry into a senior club be at under 18 or under 19? It's the last review that was done a few years ago said under 19.
Although, of course, the LTAC Cup's under 18, Ovens and Murray's under 18, and the MPNFL played them, and they had a bit more experience playing senior footy, those boys who were 18 or 19, and they won quite comfortably.
Yeah. So, look, that's a hard question to answer. We'll review it, but in the past, under 18 being a senior club's always been a bit of an issue because the kids are coming into a senior environment under that age. But it's challenging for some clubs to get under 19s, as we said. So we need to have a look at that. But I think trying to get as many kids playing top age under 17, so their next step is into an under 18 or under 19 is important.
Do you think that it's your role to say to clubs, if you've got too many players, particularly in under 19s, and we saw what Langwine did this year, and they've got a couple of players every week that put their hand up because they've got a surplus of numbers that go and play at Crew Point. We saw Mount Eliza have got so many numbers in the under 19s, and Devon Meadows have got a big connection with Mount Eliza people involved with that club now, and they were looking for some Mount Eliza players to go across, but that didn't happen. That it's up to the league to impose a type of rule to ensure that all clubs are well represented and can be as competitive as possible, and that everyone's getting a game. Every young player's getting a game every week.
I don't think we impose it. I honestly think that
or encourage it.
We ought to encourage it. It does happen at some of the junior clubs, and we've got situations at juniors now where we've got a couple of clubs who didn't have enough in a certain age group, combined with another club who didn't quite have enough, so they've actually formed one team at junior level. The combination of combined clubs will keep kids in the game. We'd always encourage those clubs that have got surplus players to help out other clubs to provide players. You know, and we had that example.
But I mean, some clubs aren't doing it. I mean, Mount Eliza haven't done it, and Devon Meadows have wanted them to do it.
Yeah.
And they've said no.
Well, we had the same situation with Cranbourne last year.
Yes.
We love. They had too many. They should have gone off and played for Devon Meadows. But as I say, we don't impose it. We just encourage it.
Now, with the girls, we called a game last week. Are you happy with the standard of the girls' competition?
Are you talking about junior girls, or are you talking about the senior?
The seniors.
Oh, the senior competition. Yeah, it's going very well. So. Within our region, but we've got a competition, as you know, that goes from St Kilda to the Bass Coast as a senior divisional women's.
Is that a concern?
Well, no, because it provides that opportunity. So we've got 3 divisions. So again, you've got the top division where you have an Eastern Devils and a St Kilda Sharks and a Seaford, Cranbourne. They're strong clubs that need to be playing against each other in women's footy. And at Division 3, you've got clubs that are coming in as development clubs. So I think that's important. And one example is Pakenham, who last year were being beaten by 100 points every game, and this year they've developed their girls and they're actually winning quite a few games. And so we'd like to see more MPNFL clubs come into that competition. We're talking to the likes of Somerville and others who should have a women's team. So it's at the moment 3 divisions with 25 clubs, and we'd like to get some more.
Are you worried about the low scores? I suppose it exists at AFL level as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or do you think that'll eventually take care of itself?
No, not particularly worried. I think all we're worried about, if we look at our under-18s, for example, about the gap between top and bottom, there's a lot of games that are 20 goals to nil sort of thing, which we just have to avoid over time. So no, I think the women's game is actually going very well with the interleague game, which you saw obviously. That was a really good showcase for the girls in our competition playing against Southern. I was really impressed with the way some of those girls went about it.
Now, I keep being asked about this every week, the footy record. There are a lot of people who go to the local footy.
Yep.
A lot of our more mature citizens love their footy record, love to look at the numbers, love to read about the clubs, and they want the footy record back. Is it going to come back, or do you see it remaining in an electronic form in the future, as it is at the moment?
I don't believe it'll come back. And look, this was a conscious decision of the clubs. Like we went to the clubs with the proposal to go digital, and the feedback was varied. Look, I can honestly say, when we did talk to the clubs, a lot of clubs, we got ourselves down from whatever number it was several years ago, that each game had 150 records delivered. And a lot of the clubs said most of them were getting thrown out. So it was just interesting that feedback that you get. Alternatively, you've got the app. So the record app is actually a terrific record of what takes place. I think people find it a bit difficult, to actually utilise an app that have been used to a footy record, and I sort of understand that, but the amount of traffic that goes through that app is enormous, to be honest. So it actually creates something that not only the people at the game, but people away from the game have got all that information available. What we do provide to the clubs, and some utilise it and some don't, we provide them with a link to actually print off the 2 team sheets the same way as what would have been in the middle of the record. So most of the feedback we get is they just want to have something that shows who the players' numbers, and so the opportunity is there for the clubs to provide that A4 folded sheet with the club numbers, and so that's an alternative. But the digital record is always going to be there.
Now, Michael Keegan, Darren Corcoran and Jeff Calder, we thank them for their questions on this. They've asked this question on the website: can the hard copy record and the GameFace app coexist together?
Well, short answer is no, because the investment's been made in the app, and that's where the clubs are providing funding for the app and also for their social media content, which has improved 100% this year on what it's been, and provided for by GameFace. So it's a terrific service. So there's not really the sustainability of generating and creating this app at some expense and still having the record.
One more question, and Craig Potts would be disappointed with me if I didn't ask it. He, of course, is Luke Potts' father. He said, why isn't a percentage of gate takings during finals passed back onto the clubs? And can you understand their frustration a little bit by that, John? You've explained that to me, and I understand where it's coming from, but I can also understand the frustration of the clubs too.
Technically, it is passed back to the clubs. So the way the funding of the MPNFL works, and you've got to bear in mind that only 3 or 4 years ago, the MPNFL was in serious financial position and potentially insolvent. So we've had to make sure that the league is sustainable and viable. One of the revenue earners for us is the finals, and what the funding from the finals apply. It keeps the fees that the clubs pay down, and we haven't increased. AFL Vic and AFL South East haven't increased the fees to the clubs for some years now. So that's really important that we actually do keep the fees that the club pays down. We've also got the expenses of the finals. So when we keep the gate receipts from the finals, but we've also got to pay for the people manning the gates, the security at the finals, and various other costs of running the finals. The clubs who host the finals do get the benefit of the catering and the bars, etc. So there is some spread around of the money, if you like, from running the finals.
And talking of security, we thank Lee Davies for this wonderful question. Is the security doing any pre-season training to prepare for the streeters?
One of the highlights.
It was one of the great highlights, wasn't it? And I tell you what, because the guy had a head like mine, not a great head, but the rest of his body was a lot better than mine ever will be. Glenn Carter plastered my head on his
body.
head.
I'm not sure how many people,
on his body, yes.
I'm not sure how many people were looking at the head necessarily, but
that's exactly right.
I quite liked the umpire in the background who paid the
that was very good.
The holding the ball decision. But look, I'd love to reproduce last year's grand final. It was just a sellout crowd. And a fantastic game and a great advertisement for the MP. Now, as was the Division 2 final between Red Hill and Dramana. It sort of took backstage a bit afterwards, but it was still a very good game.
We thank everyone for their questions. Just before you go, John, who wins the first division? You can put your head on the chopping block. And who wins the second division grand final?
That's a fantastic question. Look, I would have said Sorrento a couple of weeks ago, but,
got a lot of injuries.
They've got injuries, and they've had a few players leave, and I watched the Pine Sorrento game a couple of weeks ago, where Sorrento, because of the injuries, sort of fell away a bit. So I don't know in Division 1. I don't know. Dramana have been going terrifically well, and then lost a home game to Rosebud.
They did.
And Rosebud's a
They haven't lost at home for a long time, Dramana. That was a great win by Rosebud.
2017.
Yeah.
So any one of, YCW is still sitting out of it. They're out of the 5, but they're the sort of side that if they got going, they could win it. So Pine's reigning champion, probably not playing their best.
No, but still have players to come back. So it's a great comp, isn't it?
To predict a premier, and the same thing applies in Division 2. I would, who's going to win?
Red Hill have so much depth, but they've got a lot of injuries at the moment.
They have, and they've played some fantastic footy, but are they going to be playing that same footy in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season? That's always, that's the thing. You've got to maintain the momentum, and Karingal haven't lost a game yet.
No.
They'd probably like to lose one.
I think so.
Before the final. So the only thing I might say is they probably will play in a grand final, but who knows?
Long way to go, John. Really appreciate your time. Always good to catch up. Again, I thank everyone for all their questions. John's been so generous of his time today, and we hope to do it again before the finals. And always great to hear from the AFL Southeast General Manager, John Anderson. Get your game face on.